There are moments in life that seem ordinary at first glance, but hide stories capable of touching the deepest parts of our souls. This is one of those stories. It's about a man who, for years, blended into the background. He walked the same hallways every day, pushing his mop bucket, wearing the same faded uniform, and keeping to himself. Students passed him by. Teachers barely acknowledged him. To many, he was invisible. But little did they know, behind those silent eyes was a story that would one day move an entire auditorium to tears. His name was Mr. Reynolds, and for over 2 decades, he worked as the school janitor, quietly observing life unfold around him. Every day, Mr. Reynolds would arrive before dawn, unlocking the school gates, sweeping the floors, and making sure every classroom was spotless before the students arrived. He worked through storms, icy mornings, and sweltering afternoons, always moving silently through the corridors like a ghost nobody noticed. Yet he noticed everyone. He saw the nervous freshmen on their first day, the students crying in the bathroom after a failed test, and the teachers staying late to prepare lessons. He witnessed the small victories and the quiet heartbreaks that happened in the corners of the school life. Without uttering a word, Mr. Reynolds became a silent guardian of memories, an invisible thread connecting hundreds of lives. Though no one realized it, some students would occasionally offer a quick smile or a distracted wave, but most were too caught up in their own worlds to pay attention. Rumors about him floated now and then, that he was mute, that he'd suffered some tragedy, or that he simply didn't like people. But none of them really knew. Teachers didn't ask, and even the principal, Mr. Harland, had long stopped trying to engage him in conversation. After all, Mr. Reynolds never answered. The school had grown used to his silence until it became part of the background noise, like the creak of the old floorboards or the hum of the vending machines in the cafeteria. Life moved on around him year after year, season after season. Then came the day of the annual school assembly. It was a tradition. Every year, on the last day before summer break, the school gathered in the gym for speeches, awards, and goodbyes. That year, the auditorium was packed with students, teachers, parents, and alumni. The air buzzed with excitement. Seniors wore their caps and gowns, younger students clapped as awards were announced, and parents beamed with pride. Somewhere in the back corner, as always, stood Mr. Reynolds, mop handle resting by his side, eyes steady, watching from the shadows like he always did. Nobody expected what would happen next. Not the students, not the teachers, not even Mr. Harland, who stood on stage flipping through his speech notes. As the principal called for the final speaker of the day, there was a pause. Mr. Harland cleared his throat, adjusted his glasses, and then, to everyone's confusion, called out, "Mr. Reynolds, would you please come up here?" The gym fell silent. Heads turned. Whispered murmurs filled the air. Students exchanged puzzled glances. Some even laughed nervously, assuming it was a joke. But Mr. Reynolds didn't smile. Slowly, he placed his mop against the wall, adjusted his worn cap, and walked towards the stage with deliberate steps. The sound of his shoes echoed on the polished gym floor. As he climbed the steps and stood behind the microphone, the entire auditorium held its breath. For the first time in decades, Mr. Reynolds opened his mouth to speak. And when he did, what followed would become a story told in that school for generations. Mr. Reynolds stood on that stage, silent for a long, stretching moment. The microphone in front of him crackled softly. The gym remained hushed, as if the whole building itself was holding its breath. Some students nudged their friends. A few teachers shifted uncomfortably in their seats. And in the far back row, someone whispered, "He's actually going to speak." After years of quiet presence, it felt surreal. Mr. Reynolds gripped the edge of the podium, looked over the sea of expectant faces, and began. His voice was low and steady at first. carrying that unmistakable texture of a person who hadn't used it much in public for years. But there was power in his words, gentle, deliberate power. "Most of you don't know me," he started, scanning the room. "Some of you probably never noticed me." The words landed like a quiet shock. There was no bitterness in his tone, just simple honesty. He paused, letting the silence fill the room before continuing. "For 22 years, I've walked these halls. I've cleaned up after you. I've swept confetti after your pep rallies. I've picked up the pieces after your bad days and your good ones." The audience remained frozen, as if afraid that any sound would break the spell of this moment. Mr. Reynolds continued, sharing stories of moments he had witnessed. He spoke of a time he found a lost necklace in the girls' bathroom and left it anonymously on the principal's desk. He talked about early mornings when he would unlock the doors before sunrise so the science teacher could prepare her lab experiments. He remembered helping patch up a hole in the gym wall after an overly enthusiastic basketball practice. His voice grew stronger as he went on, as though each word was freeing something that had been bottled up inside for years. What made Mr. Reynolds' speech remarkable wasn't just the content. It was the emotion behind every sentence. He spoke about moments no one knew he witnessed. The senior boy crying behind the bleachers after a breakup. The freshman who sat alone in the cafeteria for weeks, and the teacher who once stayed late, sitting in her empty classroom, fighting back tears over a lesson that hadn't gone well. These details were small, almost invisible at the time. But hearing them now, from someone everyone assumed was just a background figure, hit everyone like a punch to the chest. "I've seen your triumphs, and I've seen your heartbreaks," he said. "And whether you noticed or not, I was proud of each one of you for getting up and showing up the next day." Some students lowered their heads, realizing how many times they'd passed him without a glance. Teachers shifted in their chairs, blinking back unexpected emotion. Even Principal Harland, known for keeping his composure, felt a lump forming in his throat. Mr. Reynolds paused again, looking down at his hands, as if gathering the strength for what he wanted to say next. Then, with a deep breath, he shared something no one expected: the story of how he had come to this school in the first place. Years ago, before working there, Mr. Reynolds had been a teacher himself, a literature teacher at a different school, one he loved deeply. But after losing his wife suddenly in a car accident, he'd fallen into a deep depression, unable to return to the classroom, unable to face students without thinking of the life he'd lost. He walked away from teaching, but he couldn't stay away from schools entirely. So he took the janitor job here, needing something, anything, to keep him moving forward. Gasps rippled through the audience. None of them had known this part of his life. The idea that Mr. Reynolds, the quiet janitor who mopped their floors, had once stood in front of students as a teacher was almost too much to process. "I needed to be near learning," he explained, voice soft but steady. "Even if I couldn't be the one teaching anymore." There was no self-pity in his words, just acceptance and quiet strength. He described how, over the years, watching the students grow, struggle, and succeed had slowly helped him heal. Every late-night cleanup, every morning unlocking the school doors had been part of his slow journey back to himself. As he spoke, many students wiped away tears. Some of the teachers openly cried, not bothering to hide their emotions anymore. Mr. Reynolds glanced around, looking at faces he had seen every day but never addressed until now. "You may have thought I wasn't paying attention," he said, "but I was. Every single day." He smiled for the first time during the speech, a small, warm smile that made the audience collectively exhale. It was as if for the first time in decades, Mr. Reynolds allowed everyone to truly see him. Then he began to speak directly to the seniors, the students about to leave for the next chapter of their lives. "You're about to step out into the world, and I want you to remember something," he said, his gaze sweeping across the sea of graduation caps. It's not always the loud voices that matter most. Sometimes, it's the quiet ones. The people who watch, who care silently, who cheer for you in ways you may never notice. The gymnasium remained still, hanging on every word. With that, Mr. Reynolds paused one last time. This time, it felt like the entire school was breathing with him. Then he concluded with a message that would stay with every person in that room for years to come. "Kindness isn't always grand gestures," he said, his voice thick with emotion now. "Sometimes it's just showing up, day after day, being there even when nobody notices, and loving people even when you never say a word." A single tear rolled down his cheek, and the gym fell into a rare, complete silence. For a long beat, no one clapped, no one moved. They simply sat there, absorbing the weight of what they had just witnessed. Then, slowly, the first round of applause began. It started in the front row, from one of the students who had been known for getting in trouble all year. Then it spread, row by row, until the entire gymnasium was on its feet. Students, teachers, parents, everyone stood clapping, some crying, others hugging the person next to them. The ovation lasted several minutes. Mr. Reynolds, standing there at the podium, didn't know what to do with the attention. He gave a small, grateful nod, stepped away from the microphone, and quietly walked back to his usual corner near the gym door. As he passed by students, many reached out to shake his hand, give him a pat on the back, or whisper a heartfelt thank you. That day marked a change. From then on, Mr. Reynolds was no longer the silent janitor. He became a symbol within the school walls. People greeted him in the hallways, stopped to chat with him during lunch breaks, and even invited him to classrooms to share his story again for new students. He was featured in the school newsletter, and parents began to recognize him during drop-offs and pickups. More importantly, Mr. Reynolds' speech planted a seed in the hearts of those students. Over the following weeks, small acts of kindness started to multiply around campus. Students helped clean up after lunch without being asked. Teachers found anonymous notes of encouragement on their desks. Even the grumpiest kids found themselves softening, offering smiles to people they used to ignore. The atmosphere in the school shifted, growing warmer, more compassionate, more human. All because one man, who had remained silent for so long, chose to speak. On graduation day, as the seniors lined up for their diplomas, something beautiful happened. One by one, as they crossed the stage, each student paused before exiting and turned towards Mr. Reynolds' usual corner. Each gave him a small salute, a wave, or mouthed the words, "Thank you." It was unplanned, spontaneous, but deeply heartfelt. Mr. Reynolds stood there, tears streaming freely now, overwhelmed by the love and gratitude being sent his way. In the months that followed, alumni began to return to visit the school, and many made it a point to stop by just to see him. Some wrote him letters from college, thanking him for being part of their journey even if they hadn't realized it at the time. The school community, once blind to his presence, now saw him as the quiet hero he had always been. Mr. Reynolds never sought recognition. But in the end, he received something much more meaningful: connection, gratitude, and the knowledge that his silent watch over those hallways had not been in vain. And so, the story of the janitor who didn't say a word until the day he gave a speech that left everyone in tears became more than just a moment in time. It became a legacy. In the days following the assembly, Mr. Reynolds noticed small, almost imperceptible changes around him. Students who once rushed past him in the halls without a second glance now paused to offer a smile or a greeting. Some called him by name for the first time. "Good morning, Mr. Reynolds," became a phrase he heard dozens of times each day. The teachers, too, seemed transformed. They invited him into conversations in the staff lounge, shared stories with him, and asked about his past with genuine interest. It was as though the walls that had stood between him and everyone else had finally come down. Yet for Mr. Reynolds, the most touching moments came not from the public recognition, but from the quiet, private ones. A student would stay behind. After class, just to chat. Another would hand him a small note of thanks, folded carefully like a treasured secret. One afternoon, as he was cleaning the science wing, he found a drawing taped to his storage closet door. It was a crayon sketch of him pushing his mop, drawn by one of the younger students. Across the top, in uneven letters, it read, "Our hero." Mr. Reynolds stared at the picture for several minutes before carefully removing it and placing it in his pocket. That drawing stayed in his wallet from that day forward. Slowly but surely, the emotional distance Mr. Reynolds had lived with for so many years began to shrink. For the first time since his wife's passing, he felt something he hadn't felt in years: hope. The dark fog that had clouded his life began to lift, replaced by a soft, steady light of belonging and connection. He even started engaging more in casual conversations, his responses growing longer, his voice more steady, as though the speech had opened a door that could never again be fully closed. As the new school year approached, something remarkable happened. The student council proposed that Mr. Reynolds be the keynote speaker for the next welcome assembly for incoming freshmen. When Principal Harland approached him with the invitation, Mr. Reynolds hesitated at first. Speaking once had taken every ounce of courage he had, but after some reflection and with encouragement from students and staff alike, he agreed. The day of the assembly arrived, and as he stood once more before a packed auditorium, he felt a strange mix of nerves and excitement. This time, speech was lighter, filled with humor and gentle life lessons. He spoke about how life can sometimes put us in roles we never expected, and how the smallest actions, like picking up litter, helping a stranger, or simply listening, could change lives. "We don't always choose our moments," he said, smiling at the sea of new faces, "but we do choose how we show up for them." The incoming students gave him a standing ovation, and many left the auditorium inspired, feeling like they already had a friend in the school before their first class even began. Mr. Reynolds' story started to spread beyond the school walls. A local newspaper did a feature on him, titling the article, "The Silent Hero of Jefferson High." Soon after, a small video clip of his first speech, recorded by a student, went viral on social media. Comments flooded in from around the world, people thanking him for reminding them that kindness matters, that everyone has a story worth hearing, and that sometimes the quietest people carry the loudest love in their hearts. Despite this sudden attention, Mr. Reynolds remained humble. He continued with his janitorial duties as he always had, sweeping floors, fixing leaky faucets, and making sure the school was a clean and safe place for everyone. But something had fundamentally shifted. He now walked through the halls with a lighter step. He laughed more, he talked more, and perhaps most importantly, he allowed himself to be known. During the winter months, the school organized a special appreciation event for him. They called it Reynolds Day. Students wore homemade buttons that said "Be kind like Reynolds," and the hallways were decorated with posters of inspiring quotes from his speech. Each classroom contributed in their own ways. Some created art projects, others wrote letters, and a few even performed short skits reenacting moments of kindness they had witnessed within the school. At the end of that day, the students unveiled a special surprise, a plaque placed in the school lobby, engraved with the words, "In honor of Mr. Reynolds, for reminding us that every voice matters." Mr. Reynolds stood before the plaque, speechless for once, not by choice, but by overwhelming emotion. Tears filled his eyes as students surrounded him, offering hugs and high fives. The man who had once believed he had nothing left to give now realized he had given more than he ever imagined. Beyond the school walls, Mr. Reynolds' story inspired people from all walks of life. Local organizations invited him to speak at community events. Colleges sent invitations for him to share his experience with education majors learning to become teachers. His message of unseen kindness and silent impact resonated, especially with those who often felt overlooked or undervalued in their own jobs. Custodians, cafeteria workers, and bus drivers from other schools wrote him letters, thanking him for giving them a voice. One evening, during a community dinner held in his honor, Mr. Reynolds reflected aloud on how strange life could be. "For years, I believed silence was my only language," he said to the gathered crowd. "But it turns out, I was speaking all along, just in ways I didn't realize." The room erupted in applause, and more than a few people wiped their eyes. His humility remained intact, even as his story reached places he never thought possible. Despite the attention, Mr. Reynolds chose to remain at the school, turning down offers for book deals and speaking tours. Jefferson High was home. Its students were his family. And while he appreciated the recognition, what mattered most to him was continuing to be there every morning before dawn, unlocking doors, cleaning hallways, and keeping watch over the lives unfolding around him. His story wasn't about fame or accolades. It was about healing, about belonging, about rediscovering purpose in the most unexpected places. Years later, long after that first unforgettable speech, Mr. Reynolds still walked the same halls with the same quiet grace. But now he was greeted with smiles, conversations, and waves at every turn. New students learned his story before even meeting him, and teachers used his speech as a teaching tool about empathy and recognizing the people who work behind the scenes to make life possible. On the 10th anniversary of his legendary speech, the school hosted a special assembly dedicated to him. Alumni returned from colleges and jobs across the country, filling the gymnasium once again. Mr. Reynolds sat in the front row, this time as a guest of honor. As speaker after speaker took the stage, sharing how his words and quiet example had changed their lives, he sat there, hands folded in his lap, heart full, eyes glistening with tears. When asked if he wanted to speak again, Mr. Reynolds stood, walked slowly to the microphone, and with a knowing smile, said simply, "Thank you for noticing." The entire gym exploded with applause, cheers, and standing ovations that lasted long after he stepped away. And so, it's a story of the janitor who didn't say a word until the day he gave a speech that left everyone in tears. Came full circle. It became more than just a single speech. It became a legacy woven into the history of Jefferson High School and into the hearts of everyone who walked its halls. Proof that sometimes the quietest people carry the loudest lessons, and that one voice, no matter how long silent, can change everything. If this story touched your heart as much as it touched mine, don't forget to hit the like button and share it with someone who might need this message today. And tell me in the comments, who's the Mr. Reynolds in your life? That one? Person who's always been there, quietly making a difference. And if you want to hear more real stories like this about ordinary people doing extraordinary things, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next video. Thank you for watching. And remember, sometimes the quietest voices leave the loudest echoes.